So why didn't you just rent a truck and move yourself?
Once was enough. Smashed dishes, sore neck, family drama.
So moving yourself's not as easy as it looks?
That's why we used Mayflower. They packed, loaded, timed everything. No chaos, no chiropractor.
But isn't a mover more expensive?
Not really. After the truck rental, gas, time off, and broken stuff. Plus, I actually slept.
Okay, I get it.
Do yourself a favor. Move with Mayflower and relax. Moving? Go with the pros every step of the way. Get a free quote at mayflower.com.
Alright. Just before the show starts, I just wanted to say, obviously, thank you and that for listening. But there's new stuff on my website, mate, worldaroundyou.com. So if you're finding this and you don't have a clue what that means, I make stuff out of dead rats and that, mate. I put pencil sharpeners up rats' arseholes so you never lose your pencil sharpener again. And I make other bits as well, like stuff out of mouse testicles. But I've started having shirts printed and designed, mate, so you can have Mothman with his cock out now on a t-shirt. You can have the safety fox with a fag in his mouth on a t-shirt. There's all sorts, mate, there's all sorts. It's worth going and having a look. Anyway, I'm not going to take up too much of your time because this episode is pretty long, so I hope you enjoy it. It's all about the first Pokémon movie. Well, the remake of the first Pokémon movie, so hence the name of the show, Mewtwo Strikes Back again. Alright guys, I'm the world around you, and this is Pause for Thought on Threshold FM, and this week I thought we could look at what they were trying to put into children's heads back in the mid-90s with the first Pokémon film, Mewtwo Strikes Back, except I'm going to be using the modern 3D remake, so that's where we've got the name, Mewtwo Strikes Back again, which is an oversight on Nintendo and Game Freak's part. I gotta say, like 4Kids or whatever, they should have named it that, but like the original of this, along with Space Jam, were my favourite films as a kid. So there's a good chance that this film could actually be responsible for the way that I see the world. Maybe Japanese brainwashing is the flavour of soap used on the creases of my cortex in particular, but we won't know until we pick the film apart, I guess. So let's have a song to get us started. This is Pray For Me by Brother Ali. So the film starts with a few blokes exploring a rainforest and looking around ancient monuments for a mythical being. A being from which half the life on Earth seems to stem from what they say. So we could view this as a group of people looking for some form of ancient deity if they were in the real world. And immediately, mate, we're reminded of Noah and the Epic of Gilgamesh. And they say, the power to cause massive flooding. That's said by one of the characters, and it's also said that it can cause plant life to bloom. And the imagery on the screen at this moment is interesting as well, because it shows the creature in what looks like a vault door from Fallout, but you could easily imagine it to be some form of representation of the Earth itself, because it was in the centre and then another layer and a final layer around that, piercing that outer layer at 8 different pillars. Now I initially thought that these could be representations of the 7 wonders of the world, but I'm not overly sure what that 8th wonder of the world would be, and as far as I know there could be 8 continents that we know of. Because we definitely know there's 7. There's Europe, Africa, North America, South America, Antarctica and Australasia and Asia. But we've also got the Arctic in it, which I know it's not really a continent because apparently, they say there's no land there, it's just water surrounded by a ring of land. But what if the stories that Richard E. Byrd was telling about Antarctica were actually about the Arctic, because the idea that, everything's been inverted and that. But, sticking with the realms of possibility, and accepting the word of the bird as the truth, then that leaves one possibility, and that 8th continent would be Lemuria, which we've already covered. So, could the creators of this film be trying to tell us that there was an 8th continent that has been covered by water? They've mentioned the flood already, but could it more so be that because the Arctic is considered to be a sea surrounded by land, that this depiction of a creature on the wall of the deity and origin of all so-called Pokémon DNA is actually trapped inside of a ring? A ring that could be the Arctic Circle, frozen underneath the waters that it may have caused by itself in order to protect itself or the world. Now, if we tie this in with what we learned about the Last Airbender film a few months ago, then it makes sense, because they started in there to say that there was a connection between the water and the moon, like there supposedly is in the real world. And for nearly a year now, I've been trying to get it across to you that the moon could actually be some form of secret DNA splicing facility, and the moon is also believed to be, by some of the more mainstream quote-unquote scientists and investigators, to be responsible for controlling the ebb of the tides on the Earth. So maybe this mythical deity or aliens responsible for life on our planet has gone to sleep deep in the seas of the Arctic, or maybe it resides inside the Earth itself, and that's actually what the core of the Earth is. Or, alternatively, it could reign as king within the hollow Earth, and instead of Antarctica being the entrance to the hollow Earth, it would actually be the Arctic being the entrance to the hollow Earth, because that's just a hole full of water now frozen over as ice, almost as if to plug the hole, whereas Antarctica itself is a landmass full of fucking mammoths and woolly rhinos and huge trees, surrounded and protected by some giant ice wall. So it seems a lot more realistic to me personally that the Arctic would be the entrance to Agartha. But let's carry on with the film. In the film, they believe that the creature they're searching for had gifted some of its powers to humankind, a trope that we seem to see in many religions all around the world, the idea of this deity gifting life and powers to those beneath it, but not all of its powers. And at that moment, we see a shadow of the creature, and we can see that the shadow is visible through a crack in the wall. Now, Carl Sagan once described shadows as a way of the third dimension expressing itself in 2 dimensions. So, could this be a subtle nod to those creatures being like shadows within our dimension? Maybe they're from a higher plane of existence, and therefore proof that there is, or there are, or at least a warning of extra-dimensional entities being around us. Maybe they're from the 4th or the 5th dimension, maybe from further up, 6th, 7th, 8th, use your imagination, innit? Maybe that's why there's 8 pillars. Maybe these creatures are from the 8th dimension. But maybe in our dimension they can't show their full form, or at least they choose not to show their full form amongst us humans, using like some way of altering our perception of reality, a bit like the Men in Black do when we learn about them, or if you want to call them shadow people, or even like black-eyed children meet. Right, they then claim, these scientists that are exploring this jungle, that they found a fragment of this creature, which they call a Mew, and that they intend to use it to recreate one for themselves, which ties in a lot that I've spoken about in the past on these shows about clones, and maybe also about how there seems to be something in a lot of animated programs about cloning otherworldly creatures and then using it for the human's personal gain. We then see the creature in its full form, and it flies off towards some icy mountain in the distance that's surrounded by a sea of green trees and a blanket of cloud. Could this be a visual representation of its real-life home, the Arctic, a frozen mass surrounded by green? Or maybe to show that in real life, this creature resides in Antarctica, which in itself is surrounded by a sea, and the clouds could represent the ice wall that prevents access. Or maybe, could it be more metaphorical, and that this godlike creature resides on a mountain like the gods of Olympus once did? Anyway, we're only a minute and a half into the film itself, and that was just the introduction to the film, so we'll get more into it. We then start to hear a voice, and that voice is questioning its own existence and memories, as it seems to be rushing in the first-person view through water towards the surface of the water, towards the very icy mountain we saw moments before the credits, the starting credits. But if we're taking this whole thing as symbolic or maybe allegorical, it shows that same mountain inverted in the water as a reflection, which somewhat ties in with what David Icke talks about, with how this world is an inversion of the known world. And then we see the eyes open on a new creature as it questions its own existence. Then it says that it's just here, and that it hasn't simply emerged into this world out of nowhere, because it's here. Now, it's obvious that this isn't a natural creature because it's in a vat of liquid and it's got pipes connected to it. This ties in a little bit with what I've said about The Little Mermaid, if we remember that show. If we don't, maybe go back and come back to this one. Maybe we, or more specifically our children, are somehow made to become vessels for creatures that have no physical form, and then children's blockbusters are a way of teaching these entities about what's happened to them, or to tell them if they've been successful, or maybe to explain how they now exist in a new place that's unfamiliar to them, but they're suddenly in a body already. Similar to what the ideas of Scientology seem to be if you believe the South Park episode about the souls being trapped on Earth by massive machines and they're forced into the creatures of Earth to live out their sentences as lesser beings. Now, I was wondering now, could that be why there are people who want to create robots or so-called, AI, artificial intelligence, because that would outlast our bodies, innit, potentially by months, innit, but more likely by a few hundred years, you would hope, meaning that one so-called quote-unquote soul trapped on Earth could live out its sentence in entirety in one being and not have to restart and retrain its body again, meaning we'd no longer need children's blockbusters and we can get into making films just for adults. Not like making adult films, nothing blue in that. Maybe still a little bit of blue, but more films of like at least a 15 and up where you can have a couple decent swear words in there and a bit of actual violence, But could it also be a way to ensure that they don't live their sentence out initially? As a scientist, they could be a scientist and they're working hard to free all these souls from this weird fucking sci-fi enslavement they found themselves in. But then when that scientist dies, they could just fucking come back as like a fucking limpet, as a rock sucker, or even worse, as a fucking tortoise, and live for over 100 years whilst being able to do fuck all. Could that be why tortoises tend to be a little bit mean? Is that why we keep them as pets as well, to sort of taunt them? We taunt the souls of Xenu's trapped prisoners by keeping them in glass tanks in our houses and fucking chucking lettuce at them and the occasional strawberry and naming them after the fucking people that used to run our scout camps and that. So little shout out to Claire there. I had a tortoise, a Herman's tortoise at one point called Claire, and I named it Claire because it had a face very similar to the woman that ran Cubs when I was a kid, called Claire. Anyway, I've lost myself here. So these souls, like they could have worked as scientists, like, or they could have been more complicit, if you like, and just gone along with being in a prison, and or even helped them to keep the souls trapped here by teaching people about things like an atmosphere, and scientists saying things about satellites when really the satellites could be things to trap people here, Or even worse, they could have been totally fucking unaware creatures just living out their lives as thinking that they're fucking actual tigers, car salesmen or dogs, Labradors and that, rather than to revolt and escape the weird globular prison that they've been cast into. Anyway, back in the film, upon waking up, this creature that we've started to see instinctively uses some form of ESP to shatter a glass and to speak telepathically to the people that are around it. And the people around it are quick to give it a name. They name it the shit name of Mewtwo. Like fucking Mew harder kind of thing, because it's supposed to be like a stronger version of Mew. And to tell it that, they begin to tell it that they've created it as a clone, which could represent it could be representative of something that came to Earth and created us by splicing their own DNA with the native species of Earth, say the giants, or to create us to work for them to mine gold, if you believe in the stories of the Anunnaki, or possibly how the tall whites and reptilian alien species have produced the Greys in order to work for them. Now, Greys apparently also have communicative abilities like telepathy and the power to sort of bend our perception of reality like the Men in Black, just like how this new creature was able to bend the glass around him and break the glass into millions of little pieces and not actually harm any of the scientists or even wet any of the scientists there. The glass just seemed to avoid all the people. The people don't even get wet. So we know that these clones are potentially quite nice guys. Then the scientist says it was created, Mewtwo, was created to be even stronger, Mew harder, which again is similar to the idea of the Anunnaki, in that they initially had one race of creatures, supposedly, that they'd produced, and then they upgraded them to make another. But I suppose the question is, which race are we? Not like in a fucking weird skinhead and face tattoo sort of fucking which race is better kind of way, but in the sense that, I want to get out of this, I need to get out of this, in the sense of, were the giants then us humans, and then they further improved us to create the Greys, or were the giants there originally, then they made the greys from them, and then they suffered some form of moral upheaval and thought it was cruel to make something that was the living equivalent of a robot, often assigned the term of worker drones from ufologists, and they thought this was somewhat unethical. So then they produced humans and gave them less knowledge of their psychic powers, but instead entrusted them with free will, as they called it, or at least the power to think and act independently. I think that's the biggest question we may ever encounter as a species and on the show itself. In what order did our alien overlords create us? Are we a stepping stone of evolution, or are we the final destination? Anyway, let's have a song. This is No Rest for the Weary by Blue Scholars.
You alright, mate? Just wanted to take a little moment to just let you know there's a Patreon. So if you're interested in funding the show, chucking us a couple of quid either as a thanks, mate, I enjoyed that. If you want to do it as a one-off, I have listed a thing on my website, worldaroundyou.com, where if you decide, I've enjoyed that, I'll give him a quid. Do it that way if you don't want to subscribe to Patreon. I fully understand. But if you do want to subscribe to Patreon, and if I start getting a little bit more money coming in that covers more than just the hosting for this and truth seeking, I'll start buying books, mate, and reading books, and these will become much more well informed. So it's a little something, it's almost like an investment on your part where you get nothing back in return monetarily wise, apart from, nothing to do with money back, but you'll get hopefully better content and that, you might learn something or learn something more, or just be grateful that you don't want to read the sort of books that I want to read. Anyway, I'll let you get back into the show.
Now, the scientist, which is a word that if you say it in a certain way, could sound like you're saying psi, as in psyops, or more likely, is it a way to disguise the term CIA, a scientist. Anyway, the scientist claims that only nature and human science can create life in this world, but to say human before science, like human science, seems a bit strange, almost as if are they trying to subtly tell us that there's another type of creature capable of science in the world, in the known world around us. Maybe a type of creature that helps to explain the uncanny valley phenomenon, which if you've never heard of, we will do an episode of in the future. It is written down in my list of things to do. I've been getting suggestions as well on my own Discord, which I set up for the taxidermy. But let us know in the Threshold FM Discord there if you've got any suggestions for a show that you'd like me to cover. Anyway, Mewtwo then smashes up the factory, innit? Causing fucking massive explosions, like volcanic-like explosions and mushroom clouds and that, completely destroying the island. But that island itself does actually look like volcanic rock, almost as if it's another subtle nod to the idea of frozen aliens being dropped into volcanoes, or to show us that not all volcanic eruptions are actually caused by literal volcanoes, which again I think has something to do with the Arctic, because isn't the Arctic surrounded by volcanoes, the volcanic circle or something, the fire circles? But some of these eruptions are actually caused by science experiments that have gone awry. That's what they're trying to tell us. We then see a flying vehicle that closely resembles a vertibird from Fallout. A sort of helicopter with two propellers like a plane. Not like a Chinook though, because they're on either side of the main body of the vehicle rather than at the top and tail end of it. On the main body. A vehicle which I don't think exists in real life. I've looked for it, I can't find out like it, but it has got something maybe to tie in with all the ideas of black helicopters that a lot of conspiracy theorists seem to be bumming off in the 90s. Now, it is a vehicle though that has been used in animations and films for decades, mate, for quite a long time now, and games. They're also similar to the crafts used to drop off the clones in Star Wars Episode 2, which, weirdly enough, is another film about aliens and the production of clones. So, what are these crafts and why are they in everything? I know it could simply be a way for storytellers to be allowed to show something that looks like a military aircraft without having to get the military involved, which I've read is something that happens in American media, so that the military over there can turn any media into propaganda to make their weapons seem scarier or more powerful, or to trick people into thinking their military weapons are somewhat weaker, or other countries are. Like if it shows a tank, they have to show that to the propaganda department of the military or something, allegedly, but I don't know how true that is. I can't remember where I read it.
But maybe by having something that doesn't actually exist in the real world, maybe they can circumvent this rule. Or maybe it's to illustrate to the viewer that there are aerial crafts that we can't normally see being used in the skies, and they all revolve around people or creatures in charge, like the concept of the black helicopters or UFOs or something. Or maybe we just don't know that these things exist because we're behind the wall kind of thing, and we're within like the Truman Show dome kind of thing, but outside of that is all sorts of technology. But because they made us with regular helicopters and that, they're like, we can't just fucking introduce, jet propelled helicopters now. They're not going to understand where that's suddenly come from, so we can't have that until the fucking show ends. Or Series 5 starts, if you was to believe the Hopi Indians. Anyway, now what they want, they want to use Mewtwo for the team with the newly. They form a team with the newly formed Mewtwo in order to try and attempt to control the world. This who I'm talking about now is a bloke called Giovanni, who's the leader of Team Rocket, which could potentially be because it sounds very Italian. Giovanni, is it a nod to the mob? Is it a nod to? Is it a knob? It's not a knob. I keep saying knob. Is it a nod to the Catholic Church, to the Vatican? It sounds very like it could be. And then you've got aliens as well, which tie into the Vatican, because, what are they keeping in the catacombs and that, and all them secret documents they don't want us to know? Why don't they want us to see them? Possibly because they're written in alien. Maybe. Anyway, Giovanni's the leader of Team Rocket, a team that, from my own memory of the show and my knowledge of Pokémon, never actually shows an interest in going to space, so it's very suspicious that they would pick that as a name. Maybe yet another nod to this having something to do with aliens trying to work together with the humans that they've created to control the known world. Giovanni then puts armour around the creature that restricts its power but allows some form of element of control over the creature, just like the angels in Neo Genesis Evangelion, which I fully fucking recommend you watch. On Netflix, it's fucking brilliant. Watch the series though, not the films, where in that they've caught an angel and replicated it and built an armour around it in order to weaponise it against the other, like they use it in literal battles, like big fucking fights against the other predicted 13 angels that I think were in it. Except the scientists of Evangelion are trying to protect the world against these 13 angels, whilst Giovanni just seems to want to control the world. I think a social justice warrior would use the depiction of a rocket as well and try and say that it's a symbol for a penis. It's all about cocks. But that's pretty silly in my opinion, because as with a lot of social justice warrior stuff, I think a lot of it's quite silly and strange. Because there's been a fair few women in this film so far, and there was in the original as well, and Japanese films do tend to have a lot of female leads and stuff, so that seems like it would fall apart if from an SJW going, it's Team Rocket because it's about the penis trying to take over the world. And realistically, couldn't you really say that women are in charge of the world anyway? But I think we've touched on this, and I think that might upset a lot of people, but like women seem to be in some of the most powerful positions in the world, and have been for quite a while. So it's always seemed weird to me when you hear people say, oh, it's a male-dominated world, and Team Rocket is a way to illustrate that. Like, it's not. It's got nothing to do with that. And I may have just made that up myself, but I think what it could be is it's either a way to say, to teach the people watching that there is some form of space-dwelling entity that controls us, or maybe it's a bit more seedy than that, and it's about the so-called worship of the obelisk from all around the world, because it seems like all around the world they've got obelisks everywhere, so that makes sense that it could just be about that, and that's what the rocket is. Because that obelisk has been around for fucking millennia, mate. Like, there's one in London, one in fucking Egypt, America, in Washington, all over the world, mate, all over the world, these fucking stone sticks that kind of look like crystals. Maybe we worship crystals. And if you would like some crystals, guys, I've got loads of new crystals now on worldaroundyou.com. I've got agate, celestite, which sounds like it's from space. I was going to try and get some moonstone, because I do like my Pokemon, but I couldn't be asked. It doesn't look great. Bit of dinosaur bone, something you could pop in your mystery box. But this isn't about trying to flog use dead animals and old rocks. This is about why this also explains why there are obelisks all around the world in most major cities and locations all over, or the outside at least, of the hollow earth. So could these obelisks just be the 8 pillars that we've seen at the start of the film on that depiction of Mew? and they're poking out from the hollow earth. I don't know, you know. Now, we then see the armoured creature capture some bovine creatures, which could show how we're able to farm cows all around the world, maybe, you know, without the interaction of these extra-dimensional beings. Maybe we never would have started farming. A belief that might seem strange until you remember that many people assign agriculture as itself as a gift from the beings from the sky. Like how we learnt that Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent of Native American belief, or at least Central American belief, gifted corn and the knowledge of how to grow corn to the people of America thousands of years ago, or maybe a few hundred years ago if we was to believe the mathematics of anatomical flamenco. It's worth noting that in the film these bovine creatures are actually a Pokémon as well, that all resemble bulls. And a little nerdy bit for you, they're always 100% male, which is weird, but it maybe ties in with what I was worrying about with the SJWs a minute ago. But Taurus, which is the name of the Pokemon, it is also a star sign, Taurus, and that's a bull as well. So could it be a subtle nod to this, saying that maybe the star sign of Taurus has something to do with the conquest that Giovanni spoke of in the scene prior to this? Maybe it's a way of showing our children that the prisoners of Earth are from particular star systems, and that the creatures originally from these star systems don't abide to the known laws of nature, and they're able to breed asexually, which again is something that is seen in a lot of films and media. These otherworldly creatures breeding without the need for another of the same species. For example, the xenomorph in Alien and Godzilla, you know, they lay eggs and that in it by themselves, and quite possibly Predator too, but then again, they seem like they're ran on emotions, I guess, Predator, rather than like the chest busters and the king of the lizards, because they hunt for their pride, innit? Like, not the actual, like, a lion pride, like in The Lion King, but they're for their own personal pride, and they do get quite annoyed as well when things don't go their way, Predators. So out of all of the alien species in known franchises, maybe it's easiest to imagine predators fingering and fucking each other in order to make baby predators, which would make for a fucking sick film, mate. Not watching predators shag each other, I mean maybe, but baby predators, that could be the sequel, but it could be a sort of fucking like a buddy comedy, mate, where a group of gatherers, which is what I'm assuming the other half of the Predator Society would be called, because you've got the Predators, which are hunters, and then you've got the gatherers possibly, and they've got to look after a baby predator, which I guess kind of sounds like it could also be suggesting a film where Predator hunts a bunch of paedophiles though too, which that'd be pretty good, except I think when the pedos try to you know, cover themselves in mud to hide from the heat vision, the shine of their glasses and weird moustaches would probably give them away, so it'd be a pretty short film. But still, it'd be interesting to see how people would feel about a film where you're supposed to cheer on the bad guy, because no matter whose side you're on with that film where Predator's chasing the pedos, no matter whose side you're on, you're cheering on a bad guy, aren't you? Also, I guess casting might get a bit tricky with that. Do you want to feature in a film where you're called the baby predator, and you're a known paedophile being hunted by a predatory alien across a remote island? You know, that might be a bit difficult to pitch to people, but I bet it's never been done before though, so if someone wants to run with that, I'm happy to try and possibly help out with that, you know. But anyway, the film Mewtwo Strikes Back then starts to show Mewtwo having another crisis of self, but instead of a dried out river, as it's trying, you know, but instead of, you know, inside of a dried out river where it was trying to catch bulls, it's as if it's trying to tell us that these creatures don't actually come from another dimension, or that they're not aliens at all, but they're in fact creatures just from the bottom of the seas, which relates back to the start of the film, with Mew possibly being depicted as trapped within the Arctic Circle. What's pretty weird as well is that my Zodiac theory holds up a little further. Mewtwo defeats and controls Oxys, which are in the Zodiac and the Chinese Zodiac, you know, Taurus in our Zodiac, but for ease I'm going to relate to the Chinese Zodiac for now. And then it defeats a massive rock snake, mate. Then it defeats a dog. Like, so you got the snake, you got a dog that's actually got the patination of a tiger, which kind of covers two of the Chinese zodiacs. It also fights and defeats a creature that's allegedly based on a rabbit, gorilla and a rat in the form of one called Nidoking, when that covers three more of the Chinese zodiac. But this is all unconfirmed and just something I'm picking up on. But could it be that that's what the point of the zodiac is? That's the categorization of the beings of what the souls go into. So say when you're born in certain month, like I would be a Gemini, innit? My birthday, I think my birthday is actually today, guys, if you're listening to this as it's going out. I think my birthday's on a Wednesday, but I mean, that's besides the point. But so I don't know what the Chinese zodiac is for me, but say you've got the year of the rat, gorilla, rabbit, the dog, the tiger, the lion, blah blah blah, the pig, things like that. Maybe the souls that get trapped here by whatever traps the souls here in the volcanoes, when they melt and evaporate and become and inhibit something else. Maybe the month or the time where the stars are, maybe that's assigns when those particular souls are either freed or given a chance to live in a human. Possibly, but as I say, it's all unconfirmed, Anyway, Giovanni states that Mewtwo, the creature, was made for humans, by humans, for humans' sake. The creature gets a bit tetchy though and tries to rebel, and it's put into restraints. Then when it's floating upwards, it looks a lot like it would be if you was to get the silhouette of the angels that we learnt about a few weeks ago. I'm thinking more like the seraphim, if you remember them, than the cherubim or the gold rings, which shows as well that Pokémon is possibly trying to teach us that some humans have found a way to capture, control or reproduce angels or aliens for their own personal gain. And maybe that backfired. The creature's now going fucking mental and erupting into a fucking mushroom cloud, which could be what the atomic age was actually all about, the control of extra-dimensional beings rather than the creation of a destructive weapon as simple as a bomb. Atoms seem to have a life of their own, I guess, so you could maybe say that the atom itself is the angel and that's where life stems from and that's what we were trying to control. But you could also just view it as a way that science has been used to blur the lines of fiction and reality over the past 80 years, or at the very least, a way to indoctrinate people into a new form of belief system, one that completely ignores the existence of these creatures entirely, and instead of assigning the factors of the world to magic, angels, demons or gods, it instead implies it's all a result of fucking so-called quote-unquote science. Anyway, let's have a song. This is Microphone Killer 2 by Chris Webby and Mercules. The synthetic creature flies off and sheds its armour, which is the only way many people in the world have ever actually seen this creature, so in a way now it could hide without the worry of ever being noticed. A little bit like how Mew was first seen as a shadow rather than in its full form, and it returns to the island where it was created, and it has an hallucination of the mountain that its predecessor, the original creature, actually seems to be from. A hallucination that ends quickly and is replaced by the image of the sea and the clouds, almost as if to say that we believe there is a sea. But at the other end of the water, there could be land that we don't know about. A land with creatures far beyond our comprehension. That's what it's telling us here. The creature then sees what it plans to do as a defence against the very existence of its creators, almost as if to say from this point on, everything done by this creature, this synthetic man-made creature, is an attack on humans. What's mental is that we're only fucking 12.5 minutes into the film, mate, and I've already taken about 40 minutes of your time. So we now see them attempting to eat, and it's the same, this is now the people. They're a different scene now entirely. Now we're now seeing the people, which, for those of you not in the know, it's Ash, Misty and Brock, the main characters from the old series. Anyway, we now see them attempting to eat some breakfast, innit? And it's the same thing that's in a lot of kids' films, message-wise, saying things like, eating is important, but that's interrupted by a bloke with a bandana on, a fully grown man that now wants to fight with a child who is visibly worn out and tired. But what's interesting here is that the bandana has a skull and crossbones on it, which could represent the Skull and Bones Society, and whatever that symbolism has always represented, stuff to do with Saturn and that, that supposedly controls some of the world. Though I've also found other people that think that the bones and the symbols, as I say, represent Saturn and Saturnalia and the worship of Saturn, and that's where things like the two towers come in, with the moon within the towers and loads of little bits like that, mate. This symbolism here of two sticks in a circle basically mean that. But the skull and crossbones themselves are actually a way of showing a possible worship of the god Saturn, which is something I think I might cover in the future if I can find enough about it. That's going to be a lot of reading though for that, and it's probably going to be an actual series, like 3 or 4, because there's loads on that. Now, it ties in with a lot of things as well, that the whole idea of Saturnalia, like the symbolism of the twins, if you like. So weirdly enough, we were talking about Geminis before. That could be a thing. Maybe that's why I see this everywhere, just because if zodiacs in that are real, maybe I see twins everywhere and things like that, you know, because you've got things including, like, some people believe the Twin Towers was a symbol of Saturnalia, the Ariana Grande logo, and loads of other things as well. So could this be a way of showing our grown man could be working alongside these creatures, called Pokémon in this, but extra-dimensional entities in our world, to attack children? Except some children are protected by entities or somehow knowingly work alongside these entities. Could that be what the Montauk Project actually was? Or is it a reference to the more widely known MK Ultra, showing how, you know, seeing how fucking 10-year-old Ash in the film he was saying he's worn out, and that this guy appears seemingly out of nowhere to try and defeat him, Ash was saying he couldn't move a muscle. Then we have a battle scene, like a big on fight. Now, I'm not going to commentate on these as such, because I think realistically in these films the fight scenes are just filler. You know, it's in order to hide the greater message. But the song itself is a rehash of the original with some bits omitted, which I think is worth saying. But the line, "In a world we must defend," and then another line, "You teach me and I'll teach you," kind of makes me think once again that we're living alongside, or perhaps most of us are living whilst inhabited by these otherworldly creatures, and that the creators of this show were trying to make us aware of that. So perhaps we could join forces with these extra-dimensional entities, or somehow live in harmony with them alongside them. It also seems to repeat the line, "It's always been a dream," maybe insinuating that the world we see isn't actually the world. Maybe the real world is observed by either us or by the extra-dimensional entities within us, but never by both. Like, never the twin shall meet, you know. Who knows, though, because maybe this is all visible to me because one of the extra-dimensional entities is working alongside me, or is feeding me this slither of a worldview to try and help me get the message out to you. And if you feel like I am getting the message out to you, you know, fucking send us a message and be like, I hear you loud and clear, you know, and then send the show around to everyone else and get them listening to the message. You know, the message is, we got to be ready for the message. And I've just noticed as well, like that within the film, it wasn't actually a skull and crossbones, which is something I should mention, but a skull and crossed swords, which is the same symbology, but with perhaps a subtly gay undertone. But that's a concern for someone else and not for us. We're not going to get into any of the homophobic stuff this week. You know, if you like crossing swords, there's nothing wrong with that. I've heard about this thing called docking, which, you know, it isn't just when aliens try and take over you. Apparently you can shove your bell end, I think, into someone else's bell end. Again, not for me. But if that's what you like to do, mate, fucking go ahead. There'll be no homophobia here. Just, you know, I don't want to do it with you. Anyway, we then see a representation of what could be seen as an extra-dimensional entity that is either indoctrinated to the world of the humans or doesn't understand that it isn't actually a human because it's always around humans. Getting back to my Chinese zodiac theory of controlling the 12 species of the zodiac, we see a further 2 that are under the dominion of the artificially made creature. A dragon, which is within the zodiac, and a larger bird, sharing a lot of similarities with a chicken, except the fact it can fly, but it does seem to be a lot like a chicken, for those wondering. Pharaoh. Now, kind of like a heron, but also like a chicken because of the face bits on it. We already know that the people in the Western world can be categorised as 12 different groups. Sagittarius, Virgo, Gemini, blah, blah, blah. I don't know the rest. Taurus is one of them. And so can the Eastern world as well, with the, you know, the rooster, the cockerel, the monkey, the dragon, the rat, blah, blah, blah. Months are also separated into 12. But what if George Eastman of Kodak fame was trying to sever the link entirely by using a 13-month calendar? Or was he actually trying to say that there's a 13th species among us, this new artificial species, except history has remembered what he was trying to do was trying to change the months instead of the categorization of interdimensional or otherworldly creatures being held prisoner on what we call planet Earth. Some of the names of our months stem from Roman gods, and possibly as well from Greek gods, but representation of months... but no, sorry, the fucking planets, the years, sorry. So, the months stem from Roman gods and maybe Greek gods, but the planets do as well. Like Mars and that, and, you know, and Neptune and, you know, the fucking others. Saturn, I think, was a name of a god as well. You got to remember, though, that the star signs aren't actually a true representation of months, though, because they can actually be halfway into one month and lead into halfway of what we call another month. So are the star signs the old months, the original months, what months used to be? But as globalization marches forwards and science takes over the world in place of religion and the old ways go out of the window, so does the correct categorization of people and extra-dimensional entities. It's very hard to say with any degree of certainty, though.
Just dead quick, I wanted to let you know that I've got a giveaway going on Twitter, so if I hit 2,000 followers on Twitter, I'll do a little giveaway. When I hit 50,000 followers on TikTok, I'm going to do a little giveaway as well. I'm 1,000 people away on TikTok, so share this around, share the videos from there around. When I hit that, I'll put a video out and you might be in with a chance of winning. I'll let you crack on with the show.
Getting back into the film, no. What we can physically see now is a hologram, but that isn't the only bit of advanced technology we see represented in these moments of the film. The artificial creature, Mewtwo, seems to have had some sudden realisation, and it starts to manipulate the weather. Could it be that HARP is actually weather manipulation conducted by a creature like many folklore stories have spoken of for thousands of years, rather than a literal machine or pumping aluminium into the air like we learnt in Truth Seeking a couple of months ago? Could it be instead of that, it's an actual fucking creature? And that controls the weather, or so-called cloud seeding, as I say, that so-called fucking scientists have slowly drip-fed us to make us lose our ancient knowledge of beings with immense strength and power, like the Titans of Greek mythology, or any of the countless mythological creatures that have been believed in throughout history. And this might be our first bit of etymology for the week here as well, guys, because mythological creature sounds to me suspiciously, it's fucking easy for me to say it, ain't it? Fucking mythological creature sounds suspiciously like meteorological creature. And maybe that's where scientists originally coined the term. Whilst staring at computer screens, right, in the film, Mewtwo manages to make storm clouds appear out of nowhere, completely blocking out the sun, just like how many people on the internet at the moment believe Bill Gates may be intending to do. A man that, as far as I'm aware, is a real creature, but has spent a lot of time staring at computer screens, though that may not be anything more than just a coincidence, and we don't really like to focus on coincidences in this show. We want facts, we want ideas that we can actually fucking smash together, not just coincidences, you know, oh, this guy was here on a Tuesday and this thing happened on a Tuesday 6 months later. Not interested in that. So the clouds, right, the clouds that's being formed, spiral, leaving a sort of clearing in the sky above the island, almost like it's trying to show that technology, that being that created that being the technology that created the creature and the technology being used by the creature is the very same thing that is trapping us within the hollow earth itself. That's what they're trying to teach us there, guys. Or perhaps it's more of a dome. The clouds are forming a dome. But maybe to show us that at the centre of the dome there is an entry point. Again, it's very hard to be 100% sure on the symbology, as there isn't actually any accompanying dialogue, so I'm having to pick it apart myself here. But there is like a hole in this dome of cloud above the island, if you like. So that could be the island could represent the inside of the hollow earth. Maybe we live on the outside of the hollow earth, on top of that dome, perhaps. Maybe we are the gods. We're each a god, boys and girls. But we'll get back into it. This isn't supposed to be, uplifting. Now, it could simply be to tell us that there is darkness, like a darkness with a bright spot within it. In real life, that would be the night sky with the moon. The moon could just simply be the hole in the dome above at night time. So could it be that there is a creature within the moon that is somehow responsible for controlling the water on our planet? Or perhaps that it was created to somehow manipulate water or produce water, maybe for an alien species. And that could be why the evil organisation that created the creature in the film is actually called Team Rocket, so that the more astute viewer can realise the links between the film and their own intricate knowledge of the Anunnaki, or perhaps another alien race entirely. The bad weather, right, has meant that the boats can't be used to transport the people to the island, which is what the hologram was used to invite them to, the people. I haven't really told you what's going on in the film. I'm expecting everyone's already seen it. I'm trying to just tell you the messages in it, what you could learn. You could go and watch this yourself now and see if this is what you get from it. But anyway, the fact that they can't use the boats shows us that the very bad weather itself is being controlled in the real world, and that could be an explanation for the push of the term staycation into the modern day vernacular, a way of the weather manipulators to limit the movement of people. First we had passports, but now we have fucking HARP, Could this be because the people in the real world who are using HARP to their advantage, that's HARRP, I think, if you want to give that a little Google, they're using that to their advantage, and they're trying to stop people of different races from having children with one another, possibly. Could it be that? If we believe everything that we see on TV and social media, then everyone is actually a racist, and that includes our country's leaders and CEOs, and maybe the harbour manager in Mewtwo Strikes Back, the remaster of the Pokémon movie, is no different to the real world business leaders and middle management of the real world. Now that's only if we believe TV and social media that everyone's a racist, Now the weather is referred to as a hurricane, a weather that is actually something that exists in the real world, and a weather that many people have associated with weather manipulation technology. Could it be that seas used this weather to sort of erupt itself into waves, right? Now, well, the weather's been used to make it go all wavy, Now, could it be that seas used to be really calm? No more blustery than Lake Windermere, and seeing how Vikings used to paddle across the oceans to go and fucking invade people on tiny wooden boats, and then someone managed to possibly trap, create, train or coerce a meteorological creature and use it to make the seas dangerous so that they could limit the travel of people. It is this that could have led people like the Wright brothers to develop flight machines, and in turn what led to HARP becoming more than just a wave machine, but introduced wind to the world via hurricanes and tornadoes, a new challenge to keep the pesky explorers away from the so-called scientists' secret islands, or maybe a way for the escaped meteorological creature to protect itself from the very people that created it in the first place, possibly back in the 1800s, which personally is a time period I personally assign because a load of fucking mad stuff seemed to happen in the 1800s. Now, as a little side note, could it be that the paedophile island was actually an island of scientists? And I'm not saying scientists are paedophiles, but maybe this island was a mental scientific experiments going on, and they're like, we don't want people coming here and seeing the vats of fucking cloning facility stuff, so let's tell everyone it was full of nonsense. Just as a little side note, just a little something to get your brain to, to nibble away at. Now, in the film, we then learn that a woman has gone missing, a thing that we know happens in real life, like how last time we learned about Robert Badella. He would keep people prisoner. Some people will take hostages, but what's worth realising here is the character that is missing in the film, Nurse Joy, a woman that is the same woman in every town in the whole universe that we're witnessing, a clone, if you like. There are countless Nurse Joys, so could this be what is happening in real life when a woman is kidnapped or goes missing, never to be found again? Maybe the real life women are clones, and they're being rounded up to either be bred from, experimented on, or to work within the very cloning facility that created them inside of the moon. More likely, though, is that they're actually taken, right? And we are told by the media that they've been killed because these people are sort of reconnaissance unit for the aliens or the so-called scientists. Maybe the very serial killers that we're taught to fear are the collectors of souls, but not in the rusty saw blade remove the heart kind of way, but like the spiritual beings that would guide people to the underworld. Except in the real world, the underworld is the overworld because it's inverted, and it's the big floating space station that we call the moon, right? It could also be to tell us that people are kidnapped because they are artificial people, either in the sense that they're pretending to be human by messing with our perception in our minds like aliens and alien-human hybrids are said to do, or that they're taken and forced into being a new person through means like MK Ultra, like how people believe that John Benet Ramsey is actually Katy Perry, or maybe more realistically, how about 8 famous women look almost identical to that woman in that unfunny American sitcom on Channel 4 and that New Girl. Like, there's fucking 8 of them. If the Pokemon universe, right, in the Pokemon universe, they see Nurse Joys repeatedly all over the place, and the Nurse Joys have a great influence over all their lives, just like how celebrities are seen a lot, all the time on telly and everywhere, on posters and TV shows, and they tend to look similar, and they have a huge influence over all of our lives. So we're told, or at least a perceived influence. Let's say they have a perceived influence over all of our lives. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking about Steve Buscemi now. You're bringing up Steve Buscemi in the Threshold Discord. No one looks like fucking Steve Buscemi. No one looks like him. Only Steve Buscemi looks like Steve Buscemi. Well, maybe they made him to throw us off. Maybe he's thrown into films to throw us off the cloning trail. It'd be really obvious to even the simplest of moviegoer that the government was cloning people if there was a Steve Buscemi, lookalike in another film. So by creating him, or simply by Steve being a 100% real natural human, it means that the big they can carry on abducting the child clones grown artificially inside of real women's wombs, all around the world. Embryos that replaced real embryos, but whilst the mother was sleeping, she may have been experimented on, or abducted by a bunch of greys who were also clones, and then the women believe that they've been experimented on, but that's only because the aliens have affected their perception to make them believe the aliens haven't been planning to swap out the unborn fetus for their synthetic fetus all along, and it wasn't actually an experiment, it was always meant to be, and they're actually doing what they needed to do. Anyway, let's have a song. This is Serious by Joe Budden and Joel Ortiz. Right, getting back into the film. The trainers all set off to reach the island, adding credence to my theory about the Wright brothers, because the first thing that we see is someone flying over to the island and then the other people all go underwater. So could the existence of artificially made living organisms be the real reason why we created submarines and planes? In the same way that some believe that there are entities that aren't capable of new thoughts. Like I think they were the jinn, but I'm not 100% sure if they were the people that have been taken over by the extra-dimensional entities that weren't capable of new thoughts. Off the top of my head, I'm just not too sure. Either way, people believe that these creatures are incapable of creating new ideas, whereas real people can come up with new ideas, so maybe that's the only way we can ever meet these extra-dimensional creatures, by showing them something new, and by thinking outside of the box, by showing off to them. Now, a boat appears almost as if to further the plot, but Brock, a main character, comments on how it has great timing. Could this be to introduce the ideas of synchronicity to the observing children and extra-dimensional entities living within our children, or to teach the extra-dimensional beings that have taken over the bodies of the children that, when they encounter problems, they will be approached by a machine, which we may perceive as a UFO or a USO, an unidentified submersible object, seeing as we're at a sea. Just to keep this simple though, we'll say UFO. And that machine will have a big noise with it, a vibration, because the people on it are singing, on the show they're singing, which is making vibrations, but also they're in unconvincing disguises, which I imagine an alien in a disguise wouldn't be very convincing to an actual alien that already knows of their existence. So, to add to it further, the people singing are also members of the Team Rocket organisation, which we've already worked out are a connection in some way or other to the aliens that we know about. The ship itself is even shown to have glowing eyes and jet propulsion, and it's in the shape of a creature, which reminds me a lot about all the stuff we've fucking learnt about angels a few weeks ago. Maybe these flying creatures were actually some form of robot or spaceship or fucking mechanical suit, like I suggested in that episode. So a little bit of time passes now in the film, and then we see a castle on an island that's reminiscent of the Disney castle from the start of the Disney films. Now maybe the creators of the film were trying to insinuate that the creators of Disney were evil, because possibly, because the way the clouds are formed around it is also quite similar to the way that star flicks over the castle at the start of the films, which I'm now just realising is possibly a way that Disney shows that we are within a dome, on a flat Earth or trapped within a hollow Earth. Probably not to educate us though. More likely just to fucking taunt us. Now we then see the real version of Mewtwo for one of the first times, properly and clearly. The original Mewtwo, and it's in front of the moon, which adds to my idea that all these children's films are trying to teach us something about the moon, or maybe the moon is a very new phenomenon, and we're being manipulated by using media like cartoons, films, and artwork. Maybe they've been able to make us believe that the moon's been there all along. There are always links to the moon, innit, to make it seem like it's part of folklore as well, like with werewolves, if you remember the werewolves episode. But werewolves are based off an entirely different bit of folklore that realistically had nothing to do with the moon, and instead was based on some form of shape-shifting entity. Maybe those very entities have drawn the moon here, not like literally drawn it in the cartoon. Well, yeah, drawn it into the cartoon, but pulled the moon here or put the moon there, and it could be a ship that contains more of these extra-dimensional entities or aliens, or maybe it's a way to portal or a window for them to come through. It could be a ship that was built by the shapeshifters in order to create clones of us and to infiltrate our planet further without the need for more shapeshifters, because I would imagine that would create some form of power struggle if they were to invite more of their own species here, if there was too many of them. Like what happened between Enki and Enlil when they argued about over what should be done with the humans. See, we're fucking constantly being taught about all this stuff, mate. Constantly and everything. Now, back in the film, right, they enter a cave network beneath the castle, which could also be thought of as a kingdom, if we want to view the castle as a kingdom, because a castle could be an indication that, there's a kingdom there. Meaning potentially it could be a nod to the hollow earth and the idea that there is a king above that rules the earth below, that rules the hollow earth. Whatever rules above rules below, which I think we may have covered or at least touched on in the...
Back to school is busy enough. The last thing you need is shopping that makes it harder. Whether you're moving into a dorm, your first apartment, or just getting organized for the semester, Wayfair makes it easy to get everything you need in one place. Furniture, bedding, storage, decor, study essentials, all at prices you'll love, with fast shipping before move-in day. Get everything you need for back-to-school season. Shop Wayfair.com today.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
A Hollow Earth episode. Maybe we'll come back to do a proper Hollow Earth episode, I'm not sure. Now, the lady at the castle is the brainwashed Nurse Joy, but she doesn't remember a past life, only that she's been there since the beginning. Now, this shows that maybe the idea of the evil organisation, Team Rocket, is responsible for brainwashing, just like how MKUltra happened in the real world, except rather than with drugs, which we are allowed to believe it was actually done through, maybe psychic powers. Maybe it was done through psychic powers. Something that sounds far-fetched until you realise that that's what the Montauk projects had something to do with. They was to do with psychic powers, and people that have had communications or visitations from aliens and MIBs often say that they spoke without opening their mouths. They speak telepathically and alter the perception of reality, making you see them as a person rather than seeing them as a fucking shadow creature or as a fucking minotaur or whatever, Just like how Mewtwo has done to this nurse, completely altering her perception of reality and time. But could it be deeper though? A way of very subtly saying that healthcare professionals believe that they're doing one thing, but in reality they're doing something else entirely. No evidence for that as such, and you got to be very careful what you say about healthcare professionals at the moment in the current climate, but it's just a thought though, because if I personally wanted to gain access to a load of people to conduct covert experiments, then I'd use a hospital, innit? And a hospital would probably be where I would set up my base of operations as well, because think of everything that the people in the hospital do. They all believe they're there to help, and if they believe they're there to help, they'll do that because they think it's helping, because they've been indoctrinated into science and into what they think is facts and biology, and chemistry. But realistically, that could just be some extra dimensional entity experimenting on us to learn all of our weaknesses, or to try and see if the biological weapons or radioactive weapons are actually working against us. Just as a thought. Now, as a very quick point, There is a Pokemon that represents air pollution called wheezing, and 3 characters who work for Team Rocket actually survive now by using wheezing. They survive being underwater. Now this makes me think that maybe pollution could be the best way, or was the best way, to attack these otherworldly beings, and that's what's allowed us to survive in the real world against their constant threat. Maybe the people that are against pollution are misinformed or brainwashed by the extra-dimensional beings to try to use our weaknesses, such as our emotions like guilt, against us to weaken our position against the artificially created creatures and allow them to strike or complete their goal, which I can only guess is to eradicate us as a species. Now, as a side note, there are people that believe pollution and the Industrial Revolution is the only thing that's actually saved us from global warming. That was actually we created a shell and an extra sort of ozone, an extra bit of protection by pumping so much smoke into the air, and that's protected us from the sun's rays. But could it also be the converse of that, by stopping the sun's rays from getting to us? Could that be actually what stopped our psychic powers and stopped all of our magical powers and stuff as a species? Now, back in the film, the characters are led through a door by a candle-wielding woman from the dark and into the light, a light which then shows a DNA strand within it as a shadow. We then see the members of Team Rocket trying to access the palace from underground tunnels, which I feel could be a way to teach our kids about the deep underground military bases throughout America and throughout possibly the entire world. Maybe these tunnels are to try and find a way to secretly approach the artificially constructed extra-dimensional entity. Maybe that's why there are so many aliens down there and all, if you believe the stories from Phil Schneider with his fucking electric finger guy, you know, that attacked him. Maybe the American military has been working with otherworldly creatures to try and stop the half-breed, or after all we've learned at the start of the film, and that, you know, it's got a bit of Mew DNA and a bit of human DNA. Could this be a reference to all of the stuff in modern law about Jesus and the Antichrist, beings that are half God, half human, or half fallen angel, half human, respectively? We're then literally told that it speaks with telepathy. It uses a force that paralyses a man and flings him around in the air, claiming to make his own rules and using the power of this creature against the man. If we see the Pokemon as an allegory for weapons, then this makes sense. We make the creature from an ancient creature in human DNA, but that ancient creature is responsible for the creatures that exist in the world regardless. So this ties in with how many people believe that certain technologies have been gifted to humanity from aliens throughout the ages. So it makes sense that something with the same knowledge and capabilities would also understand how to redirect those same weapons and use that knowledge against us. Mewtwo releases the woman from his control and the headpiece, which is a tiara, that falls off of her. Could this be a way of showing us that the leaders of the world are under the control of a higher power? A lot of Americans seem to believe that their leader does what they do with God or with Jesus. And in England, we sing to God about our Queen as a way of a national anthem. So this could make sense because these people in charge, as far as I'm aware, have no literal superpowers, though monarchies are said to have certain special qualities in their blood that helps them. Maybe the things in their blood is what allows them to communicate with the extra-dimensional entities that clearly control our lives. Or maybe it's to show us that once these indicators of power are stripped away from the people in charge, that they're just human again, nothing more and nothing to be feared. Or could it be a way to show us that any of us can be physically controlled at any given moment and released at the drop of a drool-encrusted hat? We may never know. Let's have a song. This is Prevention by Mike Righteous.
Did you know that I release books? I release a book every year, mate. So I've released Uneducated Guesses, which was a bunch of big words that I don't know the meaning to, but I took educated guesses at what I think the words mean by breaking down the syllables and drawing a little illustration as well to help, to help further illustrate what I think the word means. Then we've got How to Date an Antique Table, a lover's guide, which is everything you need to know about getting your end away with an antique table, from where to pick one up, how to get one home, dating ideas for where you could take it, chat up lines as well, mate. There's all sorts. And in the backs of that book and the newer book, More You Know, you get some images as well from my taxidermy, which is a kind of little nod towards what I think is going to be my fourth book, which will be a collection of all of the things I've made over the past few years and little stories about them and that for you. But yeah, More You Know is the third book. And if you join the Patreon,
You get access to all 3 books as PDFs, and you also get a discount code for use on my website with some of the canvases, well, all of the canvases that are on my website. So you get like a $5 off on them and stuff like that. Plus you get access to all the videos of me sitting in my cupboard recording these. But that's all available anyway. The books, the canvases, they're available as, what should we call it? Well, to everybody. To everyone. Well, I don't know why I struggled with that. They're available to everyone. Also, just to... If you're thinking about joining the Patreon and you want to know, well, what are these videos like? For this episode here, that's why I've got so many, what do you want to call them, shills thrown in between them. It's because for this episode, I wanted this one to be kind of my flagship, so I've left the video upload of this up on my YouTube so you can find it if you want to and see what sort of thing you'd be getting and being able to watch. Plus, you'll also be with Patreon. Patreon people are about 11, 12 episodes ahead of what comes out on here, at least. So that's something, you know, if you're really thinking to yourself, oh, I want to know more than everyone else knows about what Jack's going to say. Oh, I mean, if that is what you're thinking, I mean, you know, there is the great outdoors, and, you know, yeah, as much as I would like you to give me, you know, £1 through Patreon every month, I think you would... You need more going on in your life if this is all that you're looking forward to. But if it is all that you're looking forward to, patreon.com/worldaroundyou. Anyway, I'll let you crack on with the show, mate. The creature, the artificial creature Mewtwo, then says he's capable of controlling the human brain, something that many people have associated with aliens and the gods for millennia. We then see a very natural-looking factory. Naturally, not in the sense that it looks like a normal factory, like it's been constructed from living tissue rather than machinery. Green glowing goo with Pokémon inside of them, tubes and weird space-age patterns. We then learn that this is a replication of the cloning facility from earlier in the film, except it seems to be a lot more advanced. We then see how simply a clone can be made, just a few strands of hair, and out pops another clone. We then have my suspicions confirmed, right, that the Mew from the beginning is a nod to the extra-dimensional entities of the real world, because we literally see it enter into a little portal to disappear. So where does it go? Where does it travel through these tunnels that we can't see, possibly? We then see humans try to use Pokemon against Mewtwo to damage and attack it, and adding into my idea that these are all allegorical for alien-gifted technology, the artificial creature is able to stop the attacks dead in the tracks and repel them as simply as flicking its fingers. Its fingers are worth mentioning as well, because a lot of people have described aliens as having long fingers, and this artificially created creature has long fingers, but only 3 on each hand, which the 3 fingers could link to the idea of the Holy Trinity, the Father or God, the Son or Jesus and the Holy Spirit. So, could this be a way to try and show us that what we consider God or Jesus is an artificial construct, and in fact the creature we made and have been made to forget by the creature that we made it? Or is it trying to teach us that try and make us believe that religion itself is something we invented, and that religion has started to control us, bleeding into every nook and cranny, infecting everything, because it's all been made to be used, it's all been made from the beliefs held by those people who were aware of religion. You know, society, right? Society is rules, even to a certain point. Science was held up to the laws and rules and religion, until Charles Darwin went against it and said that maybe they weren't all created by some godlike entity, but maybe they evolved. But maybe science itself is being used or created by the entity as a sort of controlled opposition to make us believe that there are only 2 possible solutions, because as humans we seem to love the idea of 2 possible outcomes. Male or female was one held by everyone until a couple of years ago, when that started to be challenged. On or off was another, but now we've got features on tellies like standby mode, red or blue, which is applicable in most cities in reference to sports, politics, and ironically even Pokemon games. But there could be a 3rd or 4th option, and maybe that's what Pokemon Yellow version was trying to teach us. But as cynical Westerners, we view the 3rd installment of a series as a cash grab rather than a deep, meaningful lesson. Now, I don't know what the 3rd option would be in regards to creation, because you've got God created everything, God made everything, or the Big Bang irradiated nothingness and made everything, but that's still something that we can't understand, making everything. It's still the same thing. A Big Bang is basically just like a fucking another way of saying God, it seems, because everything's made from nothingness, and then, you know, it made things come into existence, and those things evolved into what we see around us right now, and possibly what we don't see around us right now. Maybe the reality is somewhere in the middle, though. Like something created this perception of reality around us, and that itself evolves constantly over time in order to keep us under the control of the being that thought it all up. But where could that have come from? Well, that ties back into the human desire for two outcomes, things either existing or not existing. What if everything exists constantly and always has done and always will do, either in a loop or just infinitely? Anyway, it's not important, and we're getting massively off topic. Just so you know where we're up to in the film at this point, we're 46 minutes into the film, innit? Just in case you were wondering, and I'm on my 13th page of notes at this point. So we'll try and stick to the film more, because I think we can round this up pretty soon. We see creatures awaken from the cloning facility now, and they could be seen to represent the Titans, I guess, because you've got fire, water and earth are represented in 3 monsters that we see, which could show how this artificial creature could have the ability to control the very things that create these elements. Something we learn, like atoms, something we learn here is that the cloned Pokemon all seem to have stretch marks. Now in current day, we're told that stretch marks are made from rapid changes taking place in your body, often associated with weight gain or pregnancy. But what if stretch marks are actually an indication that that person has been replaced by a quickly grown clone? A problem that's like many Canadian families are currently experiencing in 2021. Look it up. That is being explained away, what's happening there in Canada at the minute, by scientists as some form of illness of the brain, because people don't believe their family members are the same people that they were yesterday. But what if they're just able to see through the charade, and the stretch marks could be a dead giveaway? What if Uncanny Valley is happening there, and they're experiencing the Uncanny Valley sensation because their family members have been replaced by clones grown in the moon, by an artificial entity that was created by an evil organisation thousands or hundreds of years ago, maybe in the 1800s possibly. Right, tonight I recommend that everyone listening goes home and tells their partner that they're going to inspect them for stretch marks, just to be sure, to make sure that they're the same person that they did originally fall in love with. Then report your findings to your local church and authorities if you do find any stretch marks. Do it subtly though, because we don't want them to know that we know that the stretch marks are a giveaway, because obviously these people that have made the clones, or these things that have made the clones, have probably infiltrated your local religious settings and your local authorities. So maybe just report them to other people, like send a message around to people on social media saying, my wife's now got stretch marks, I don't think she's the same woman that I once knew. You know, things like that. Maybe tell her as well. Anyway, we then see that the cloned versions are actually much stronger than the originals. This could be another way to test your loved ones. Their recent weight gain could be an indication that they've become stronger, since they're now carrying more meat around. It could also show you that their clone hasn't got the same understanding of the world as what the real version had, and that maybe they're discovering new foods that the real version didn't originally eat. So if they started eating asparagus, you know, and you think that's a bit weird. Vegans, mate, that could be where vegans have come from, because like, I don't want to eat meat, because I could have been created just like that cow could have been created. That cow shouldn't exist, I shouldn't exist, so I'm only eating vegetables. Maybe vegans are the clones. Alright, so these clones also tie in with the idea of the Anunnaki creating a second batch of humanoids that were more capable of carrying out their tasks. And this, in the film, could be a way to illustrate that, or simply a way to illustrate how replaceable we all really are. Now, considering the illustration of how Mewtwo had advanced the technology to make the lab seem like it was a living, breathing entity, could it be possible that the creators of the film, Mewtwo Strikes Back, are trying to show us that we will all be replaced with technology? Bear in mind this film is a remaster, so the idea of self-checkouts in Tesco's wasn't really around in the late 1990s when the film was originally released. So this was, you can see how they drip feed us information. By having the idea of a laboratory and a science lab that wasn't man-made and that seemed natural and like it was actually alive amongst itself. That shows us how we were going to be replaced as checkout staff in Tesco's and Sainsbury's and Morrison's and all the other wonderful supermarkets that exist in the UK that could be looking for voiceover work from me. After the battle that happened, right, things that resemble purple eyes are summoned out of nowhere, maybe from another dimension. And again, the entity says it creates its own rules. Could that be to say that the artificially created Son of God or Antichrist is actually responsible for the religion or science that we know of, and are the rules it's alluding to in this film? Another indicator that the whole film is about an alien using our understanding or reliance on their technology against us is that Ash claims something is impossible, but Mewtwo says that anything is possible with the ones that he makes, which is a lot, I guess that's a lot like kind of saying, don't, we should wear you should wear a condom because, you could get her pregnant, and then you could say, not the way that we do it kind of thing. Is Mewtwo just being like, I've invented anal sex? Is that trying to, again, with the weird homophobic bits at the start with the crossed swords, is it trying to, drip feed the idea of homophobic things into people's minds rather than the acceptance of gay people, which is what we all really, really want, because they're just as sound as other people. I mean, you can have gay people that are bell ends, you can have straight people that are bell ends. I don't think it matters if if they're gay or if they're straight, but, I think Mewtwo cares. Anyway, with this implication that whatever technology we've been gifted by aliens has limitations put there on purpose by the aliens to be able to limit our own capabilities, or through the aliens' naivety in a belief that we would use the technology as a stepping stone towards further advancements rather than simply viewing that as the pinnacle of creative endeavours. Something that, in my opinion, science likes to do, since it hasn't really created much new stuff. It's only ever slightly improved what already exists within its own limitations. So surely if science was real, and scientists could do anything, then instead of creating phones with smaller batteries, they could create cordless toasters, or a way of dehydrating a house into a pill form so that you can take holidays without worrying that someone's going to break into your house whilst you're away. Plus, you could just shit out your house when you get to wherever it is you're going, and that would eradicate the need for rental kennels, hotels, caravans, 3 other things that, in my opinion, scientists have failed to innovate for dozens of years. Besides, listen to what I'm even saying. I've been brainwashed here and all, because I'm believing that scientists can only innovate rather than create something new. The only thing society wants us to believe can create something new are extra-dimensional entities, and you really have to ask yourself why that is. Let's have a song. This is New York by Angel Hayes. One of the next things we see is Pikachu running up the double helix staircase before getting captured, though before it is captured it releases loads of electricity into the helix, which could be a way to try and ready humans for their digital enhancements or other cybernetic enhancements in their bodies, or to show us that DNA itself is a way to create things, and by adding that little spark of electricity it brings it to life. More likely though, is to show us that our very DNA is the prison that contains us all. We're all restricted by our own biological constraints that may have been put there by our extra-dimensional creator. Now, we see lots of metal arms are responsible for the cloning, which may be a way to say that machines could be controlled by the possibly demonic entities, which is something I touched at the start of the film. We got a little nod to that at the beginning. Maybe that's what all the technological advancements have been about in the past 100 or 200 years, producing something with an interface that can be more easily controlled by something that does require rules. Maybe that's why all the teachings of free will That's what all the teachings of free will have been for, to teach us that we have free will kind of thing, that we're not robots, we're not AI, when realistically we might be robots or AI, just made by the clone. We could be clones in the same way that the clone lab, right? In the same way that the clone lab was originally made by people and it was all machines, then it got made by the clone itself and it looked like it was a living, breathing organism. Just like that's what we could be. We could be seen to be living, breathing organisms, but reality, we're artificially made. We're like machines, but made of flesh and meat and blood. But maybe not all of us. I don't know. Maybe that's what they're working towards. Maybe they teach us these things about free will, though, to make us believe that we can't be controlled, because maybe that's all part of the rules of this game. If we believe something, then it becomes reality. It becomes our perception of reality, the world around us. It becomes a part of how we perceive the world, meaning it becomes the world that is procedurally, is that the word, created by the, like when you're in a game with a draw distance kind of thing. But anyway, the procedurally created, the world that's created by the extra-dimensional entities attempting to control us either way. And by introducing free will, it means that we can do whatever we want whenever we want, freeing us from their grasp as long as we believe in free will. Maybe that's the whole point of religion, to teach us that, so that we can't be controlled by these entities, these so-called monsters. But maybe religion's against them. Maybe they're not all monsters. Maybe they're not all bad. Yet machines, right? Machines will have no free will. They'll simply do whatever they're programmed to do. Like we originally were, until someone very smart sat down and figured out that they could teach us about free will and started blurring all of the lines of what was known, you know. Maybe that's why in the Bible, proto-humans, Adam and Eve and Lilith and that, they're kicked out of Eden by the mysterious benefactor. No, not a benefactor. Well, kind of a benefactor. They do. The mysterious... beneficent, the nice creator, you know, they're kicked out by someone that was supposed to be, you know, a really nice thing, to fend for themselves into the wilderness. It could no longer control them, or they simply stopped observing the world around them as idyllic and instead saw it in a new light that the creator could no longer control. Maybe that's why Pandora opening the box led to all the evils of the world. Maybe going against what Pandora was programmed to do led to that so-called box being opened, and for want of a better phrase, the simulation started to go haywire and mad shit started happening because Pandora was finally able to see that she could do the things that she wasn't programmed to do. All of a sudden, you know, the toaster's fucking brewing water inside it, you know, and it's not electrocuting itself. Things like that, you know. Now, back in the film, Ash attempts to attack Mewtwo with his fists, fighting with a primitive technology, but Mew saves him. So could this be to tell us that the real extra-dimensional entities, the ones that have always existed and aren't suffering from an existential crisis, will protect us if need be? Or could it be more propaganda from the extra-dimensional entities? After all, Mewtwo was created to help Team Rocket control the existing extra-dimensional entities, so could this be a way to make us think the natural ones are the good guys and the bad ones are the artificial ones under our control? Maybe the extra-dimensional entities see these artificial ones as a threat to their existence or to their power over us. I think this because Mew seems to mock the human afterwards by laughing at it after he's helped it. Another thing that makes me believe this is because Mewtwo's powers are shown as blue, whilst Mew's are shown as to use pink or red powers. Now, blue is usually good, and red is usually a depiction of evil in films, so maybe Mew saved Ash because it views Ash as its possession. Its plaything, you know, its toy, just like how someone would look after one of their rat people from worldaroundyou.com. Which half rat, half action figure, if anyone's wondering. I got Big Gaz with his big fat bag of beak. Now, they then say that destiny is at play. The originals versus the improved clones. Then we get a bit of hocus pocus logic about the true strength coming from the heart. I think lines like these are always added in to throw parents off. Because as an adult, I hear that, you know, true strength comes from the heart, and I think, what a load of shit. And I bet parents did too in the cinema, you know. But they could hear the rest and think, you know, whilst listening to all the rest about the extra-dimensional entities and the aliens and the cloning facilities and gods and demons and that, they could be thinking, oh my god, what are they teaching my kids here? But as soon as they hear, you know, true strength comes from the heart, that just overrides everything, and they think, oh, that's the message of the film, fine, that's okay. They're not teaching my kids all these hidden things within it, you know. Where, you know, they just think it's teaching them about being good-hearted. Which I guess is a good lesson, but you're not worried about all the alien stuff. And Team Rocket, you know, and the worship of an obelisk or things like that, you know. Now, in the climactic battle, we do see red and blue clash against a backdrop of the hole in the clouds, as if to say there's a current fight going on between blue and red for the entry point to the Hollow Earth itself. But I suppose the question is, are the entities fighting to enter it or to exit it? Then, there's a bit of dialogue that tells us that originals and copies are living in the same world, and that they should be able to live without fighting. There's an irony to this now because of how heavy, like, Nintendo and Game Freak have come down on people that make counterfeit versions of their games in the past. You know, but they want us to see that these creatures are all living amongst each other and that there's nothing wrong with copies and clones, they're fine. We should just live alongside the clones. Yet they won't let people make fucking ROMs of improved ROMs of their games without trying to sue them or give them cease and desists. Anyway, we then literally have a moment that gave me goosebumps because it makes me think I'm actually right. A bit of confirmation for my assumptions. Two of the creatures, the clone and its original, they start discussing the moon itself, questioning the moon. We can view this as there's a lot of fighting going on, but whilst that fighting is happening, we should be thinking of the moon, particularly a full moon. Almost as if to say the moon is responsible for the fighting between clones and originals, but the original creature, let's say, says that the moon is full. full to the top, implying the moon is potentially filled with a DNA cloning or possibly DNA splicing facility, something I've warned about in my previous episodes. But it could also mean that the moon is full of DNA, because the moon could be the original ark, if you like, and that's why there's 2 of each creature here, and it's saying all of this is in the moon. Now, slightly off topic, but I remember in a Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon, Sonic once saying something along the lines of, "It's funny, you know, we come from totally different worlds, but the moon looks exactly the same." Or we could try it in a different voice. We could try it in a Scottish accent. "It's funny, you know, we come from totally different worlds, but the moon looks exactly the same." I don't know if that's any good, but that was Sonic. So could that mean that the moon is where these worlds are observed from, or where they're projected from? Because if you think about a film being projected at a cinema, the films look different every time, but from the perspective of the characters on the screen, that bright circle of light they'd be looking out at amongst the darkness will always look the same. So maybe the moon isn't a DNA splicing facility. Maybe I've gotten it wrong. Maybe it's just because we currently associate life stemming from DNA, that we associate the moon with that. Maybe the moon is just where our reality, our world, our lives stems from, just like how everything unfolding on a cinema screen stems from the projector at the back. Again, another focus on the moon, but could it be that I'm the victim of the brainwashing that I mentioned earlier? Maybe the moon is mentioned and featured so many times because they're trying to make us believe that it's always been there, and that it's completely normal to have a fucking huge floating rock looming above our heads. It's said that the fighting won't stop as well until Mew and Mewtwo stop fighting, and the fighting is illustrated as the 2 creatures clashing in the air, except the collisions look like there's some form of invisible barrier between the 2, like they're both trying to break through that invisible plane. The question is, though, who's protecting it? Or are they both protecting their own side from the other, neither wanting to share their side with the enemy? Or is it simply that one is trying to destroy the other, whilst the other understands that it needs to protect the barrier to protect the existence of life on both sides itself? Kind of like how the wall in Imagination Land in South Park needed to be maintained, except instead of terrorists destroying the wall, in Pokémon Mewtwo Strikes Back Evolution, it's a human-cat hybrid with psychic powers that's trying to destroy the very fabric of existence in order to control the known world and whatever lies beyond. We can see that there are spectators to the event in the way of Brock, Misty and Joy, and they're brainwashed into believing that they can't do anything to help end the fighting. They can only wait, and maybe this is to try and prolong the fight, because if people just ignore it and do nothing about it, it means the fight can continue, and as long as the fight for existence in the real world is being fought, then it gives the extra-dimensional entities something from within our moon a chance to win. Whereas if we all paid attention to it, either by listening to radio shows like this on Threshold FM or listening to Truth Seeking on Threshold FM, it would take power away from the people that are currently under the control of the artificially made extra-dimensional entity, and that may allow them to be freed from its long-fingered grasps, in return slowly developing and turning the world's faces towards the moon, where we could witness the true extra-dimensional entities and put an end to this madness once and for all. Now, both entities, the artificial and the natural, both need humans to survive, it seems, and it gives them something to govern over as well. So when Ash throws himself in the middle, in the film near the end now, maybe that's why they stop fighting, because we're showing it as an emotional response, but maybe this is what ritualistic sacrifice always was, a way of showing the powerful creatures that we can kill everyone on this planet if they don't pack it in and sort themselves out. A weird but powerful message to send our possible creators that they have made for us. To send our a powerful message to send our creators, that they may have made us, but if they don't act in a fair and responsible way, we can take it away from them. You know, we can take everything that they created away just by killing ourselves and each other. Now, in return for this, Ash is turned to stone. You know, he's turned into rock by the extra-dimensional powers, which could be where the multiple layers of rock have come from on the Earth. Maybe as these extra-dimensional species or aliens fight one another, we've decided to throw ourselves in the way because they're fighting over us and they want us, so if we all get in the way, they can't have us if they end up killing us. And that could have been, the resulting blow of that could have calcified the Earth or crystallized the Earth over and over. Then maybe they work together, the originals and the clones, to restore humanity, to rebuild what they seek to control and accidentally destroyed before going their separate ways, only for humanity to come back and reach the same point over and over and over in some weird loop that seemingly makes history repeat itself every few thousand years, only with different faces and costumes. Perhaps that's where the idea of the New Worlds comes from, not as in like New World Order or the Third World, but as in what the Hopi tribe of America supposedly warned about in the wall carvings. This is represented by one of the original creatures in the film trying to breathe life into the stone man, but nothing happens. It isn't until all of the creatures work together and combine their tears that life is given back to the human. Now, could this be what the great floods throughout history actually were? And this is a way of cleverly disguising that the waters of the great floods were a way of replenishing the earth and the life of the humans that looked to quell the anger of their godlike beings that have lorded over them. Could the whole idea of the floods being a punishment be something inverted by the evil artificial entity to stop people from having hope? There are other nods as well to Noah's flood because all of the creatures are in identical pairs, standing 2 by 2. It could also be viewed as a test undergone by Ash and the others to test humanity, this whole thing that's happened. We had references to the underworld early on in the film with the cave system and the woman leading them by candlelight and being led in from the darkness into the light. And then again at the end, Ash goes from being of solid darkness into being, at least for a moment, a being of solid light, which brings in stuff to do with the Palladians and that. Now the clones then ascend to the sky and they're all taken off into the sky, coated in some mysterious light, and what looks like it is then like they look like they're sucked up by vertical sunbeams, perhaps symbolism that this world is a test for alien species to see if they can begin to make the right decisions and stop being criminals and war criminals, a sort of rehabilitation program rather than the prison put forward by Scientologists. The world around the people then changes and transforms into something else, almost as if to show us that these stronger, almost mythical creatures are actually able to bend our perception of reality and make us forget the tests we endure over and over again, whilst they play out their game to teach the new entities how best to live their lives. And maybe that's the lesson that they're trying to teach our kids, mate, that your life doesn't matter unless you're under the possession or created by an extra dimensional entity, almost as if to solidify this idea we then see that they've been thrust back in time, mate, like by a couple of days, but instead of going out to sea to this island again, the trainers are greeted by the Nurse Joy clone, who is now going to distract the people from their goal under the guise of protection, which ties in with what I was saying before. The people are cloned and then they distract us from what's actually going on, because what's actually going on is time's reset itself, but now the clone is being used to be like, don't look over there, don't look over there, everyone look at me in me sexy little outfit, like celebrities. The main characters question as well why they're in the building at all, since they've got no recollection of the events that happened or was yet to happen to them in the alternative timeline, and then they say that they might as well just enjoy themselves. And just like that, when they say that, the storm stops dead and a woman says, like it never happened. We then see that some of Team Rocket, the potential aliens, are still on the island, possibly to protect it and set off the chain of events again that will make history repeat itself in the distant future. But for now, the test is over, and the people can go on living their existence completely unaware of what they were a part of, making sure that the laboratory on the island is left alone and lies in wait to test another batch of humans when the timing is just right in the ongoing war for our very existence. And that's all we've got time for this week, guys. There'll be HDR later tonight, and you've got loads to catch up on demand on the Threshold.fm app. I think Jimmy's back tonight as well. With Jim will mix it, and I think we'll be on tomorrow with Truth Seeking at 7 o'clock. So I'll fucking see you in a bit, guys.
I hope you enjoyed the show, mate. I hope it made you laugh. I hope you learnt something. I don't know what you will have learnt, I'll be dead honest with you, because I record these outros and intros like 3 months after I've recorded the episodes, which is something I really need to start working out in my head proper and getting more of a regimented way of doing this. But I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a review, share it with a mate, I don't know, find us on any social media at World Around You. And if you've worked your way through every single episode of the podcast, including all of the Here's Hows and all of the deep dives,
I hope you found the swapcasts, mate, that are on my channel. You've got Truth Seeking as a swapcast. Go and listen. That's my other series, Truth Seeking, me and Jimmy Budd. Go and have a listen to that, mate. There's, at the point of putting this on, there's 10 hours of Truth Seeking at least available on Spotify at the minute, and Apple and all the other places, Deezer, and all the others. And there's other podcasts that I've been on as well, so go and give them a listen. Not just the ones I've been on. Their episodes and that as well. Things like the Cosmic Closet podcast, the Couple That Scares together, to name both. Anyway, I'll see you in a bit, mate. Thanks for listening. Hopefully you'll enjoy the other gear and all.
S&G Carpet & More has flooring choices built for the whole pack. Save 25% on select flooring through August 31st. Visit sgcarpet.com today.
S&G, more than carpet, where quality is affordable.